This is the first real SolidWorks teaching video for Engineering 1332, where we will be learning how to create a part. And the part that we'll be playing with today, I've got over in a little window here, just basically a rectangular block with a few different notches cut out of it. And so we'll look at solid extrudes and cut extrudes, those kinds of things for creating solids as our first intro. We've opened up SolidWorks. There's very little that we see in the user interface. We do see an option to create a new thing. I'll also point out that there's a more traditional menu, but it's hiding. Could be pinned to remain always available, but I'm just going to let it hide itself. And so we're going to go ahead and get started in SolidWorks. I'll click on the new. It either comes up in advanced mode or novice mode, and so we can work either way. I'm just going to, for now, grab a part in novice mode and say I want to create a part, and I'll click on OK. It thinks a little while, and it is now creating an empty part for me. You get a lot more user interface, so let's just take a quick look at the user interface. We get various toolbars all around the screen, and they may or may not be at the same place. Like this toolbar right here can be moved around and put other places. It might just be floating. It might be turned off. And so I'm going to go ahead and just put it back where I had it. And if you don't have one there, don't worry about it. We can always get to these tools from a lot of different ways. Some of the more prominent things that we will notice would be still some menus across the top. That file menu pops out, but it's gotten bigger. I didn't mean to click on that. A toolbar here, a thing called a ribbon here, I guess in the Microsoft world. Some tabs to get the various ribbon items. Some tools that sort of stay put in the middle of the screen. We have a three-dimensional axis system because we'll generally be working in 3 dimensions. And then we have some library elements over here, various SolidWorks resources, including, again, creating a document, going to some toolboxes and things like that. I'm going to go ahead and get this out of the way for now and not keep it open. Let's go ahead and create a part, and then we'll see how some of these menus come into play. And we'll make use of some of these menus. And so the general idea of creating a part is typically draw a sketch, hopefully completely dimension the sketch so that everything is totally known and not left to be floating around. So draw a sketch and then either extrude that sketch in a straight line to make a solid, extrude it in a straight line to make a cut, or maybe extrude it about a center line to make a circular solid or a circular cut. Would be the very most common steps that are used in creating geometries. Then there are lots of other more sophisticated methods, but we're going to use those 4 today. Actually, just the 2 of them. Straight line extrudes for solids, creating solids, and cuts. The various things we'll create, a cut, a piece of solid, would be called features. Under the feature menu, we have highlighted really the only few things that we can create right now. It would be either a straight line extruded boss or base, as it's called, or a revolved about an axis boss or base. We could start by clicking on extrude, but most features, extrude would then lead us straight to sketch. Or we could just start with sketch by creating a sketch and then move on to the extrude. That's more my habit. So I'm going to go ahead and create the sketch. And when I click on sketch, it will often show me, especially at the beginning of the document, the 3 planes, the front plane, the top plane, see if I can get the top plane to highlight, and the right plane. Those planes exist because they were created for me when I opened the document. And so I'm going to sketch on the front plane, which is my habit. Okay, the front plane disappeared. Now, one of the things I want to do is make sure that I am viewing the plane that I'm sketching on perpendicular to the plane. There are some tools here, including zooming to fit, zoom to an area, go to a previous view, cross sections, view orientation, display style. We'll use that in just a moment. Other things there. I'm going to go to this view orientation, and I can view front planes, left planes, right planes, the orthographic views that we talked about earlier when we talked about drawing views. But this one I use fairly often. It's called normal to. It makes sure that I'm drawing normal to, or that I'm viewing a plane normal. All right, so having done that, I'm going to bring in my document, my drawing, the thing I'm going to create, and talk about maybe how I'm going to proceed to create it. A lot of different things that I could do, including putting a bit of sophistication in the very first part. But I think what I'm going to do is treat this as if I were going to manufacture it. Just draw an overall rectangular block, and then cut that notch, cut this pocket, cut that notch, cut that notch. So do it probably in that order. So I'm going to draw a rectangular block that is 60 wide and 40, which is the variable b, 40 tall. So 60 by 40 units of millimeters, almost certainly, which then brings up a question: what are the units of my document? To explore that, I'm going to go over here to this menu item, expand it out, and go to, let's see, I believe it is options, and let's see, where units are here somewhere. Document properties and units. Right now I am in inches for length, pounds for force, and seconds for time. And I want to be in millimeters, grams, and seconds. So I'm going to select that unit system. I could change lots of other things, but I'm not going to right now. I'm simply going to accept those units, click on OK, and that'll be the working unit system of this document. Now, earlier I clicked on the sketch, I selected a plane. I can tell that I am still in the sketcher. I didn't leave it because of these two things right here. This thing says save and exit the sketch. This thing says abandon the sketch. If we can see these things, then I'm in the sketcher. Now that I'm in the sketcher and I have the sketch ribbon here, I have sketch tools right here, including lines, rectangles, arcs, a variety of things. I'm going to go ahead and create a rectangle, and then I'm going to anchor that rectangle, one corner of it, to the origin of my coordinate system, which would be right there, and drag it. And you can see that as I drag it, I get the location of my new corner showing. I'm going to just let go and not worry about the overall size of my rectangle, because what I'm going to do next is go to Smart Dimension, and I'm going to dimension the rectangle. I said I wanted 40 tall here, so I clicked on the line. I pull away to a place where the dimension will look pretty, and I click there. Then I've got the option to change that dimension, and I will. I'll change that to a 40, and it adjusts itself. Now with that dimension done, I will Smart Dimension this bottom line. Click on it, pull straight down, click right about there, and type in a 60, and I will accept that. And I now have both edges, or both dimensions of the rectangle. They are set, and I notice that my entire sketch is black. If I were to go create some new geometry, and I'll get rid of it in just a second, notice that everything there, I clicked more than I wanted. I just hit escape to get out of everything. Everything there is blue. That means I have not yet dimensioned these edges or those edges, but I have dimensioned the things that have turned black. If I dimension this edge, click, click, and enter, and I'm going to escape away from it, then let's see, that should have turned black on the entire edge. Maybe, let's see, we'll finish this one up. Click, Click, enter, and accept that number. Not sure why they're not black. Maybe I need to change the number. Change that to a 41 and a 36. I'm just double clicking and typing. Oh, I know why this isn't black. Okay, nice little discussion. This is dimensioned, yes, but it's still free to float. Let's see. If I grab a line, I can drag the whole thing around, which means it's not totally locked down. I'm starting to regret that I showed this, but I did. Let's see. So to lock it down, what I would have to do is maybe locate this one point so that the whole thing isn't floating around. I would go ahead and, no, I'll show how to do that later. I'm just going to delete these for now. Drag over them, hit the delete key. Those things are gone. The part of the sketch that I care about, sorry for my being a little bit out of practice, the part of the sketch that I care about is fully dimensioned, and I will exit the sketcher and save it. And notice we already saw the model tree briefly earlier when we're looking at documenting a model. So now I've created my sketch number 1. With sketch number 1 highlighted, if I go click on features and extrude boss base, it will use that sketch to create an extrusion. Things have turned yellow. I'm going to press the middle mouse, we already talked about that briefly, and rotate it, and see that I'm going to get a rectangular solid that has the cross section that I created. I could change the length of that rectangle a lot of different ways. The best way to do it is just come right over here and type the dimension that I want into that length box. That's the length of the extrusion, and I want to extrude this 100 is what that little drawing picture says. So there's an extrusion of 100. Let's look just briefly at this box. We'll come to it in a lot of detail later. Says direction 1, how do I want to extrude? There are things like blind, up to vertex, up to surface, up to body, midplane, a lot of choices. The one that makes the most sense right now is blind, which says extrude in one direction. I'm not going to go over here and enable direction number 2 where I could extrude the other side. I'm going to disable that and leave that alone. So if I want to do a one direction extrude in a dimension that I know, I just type the dimension in there, call it good. There is my boss, which has now been extruded. And I have created all of the material needed to create that object. Now what I think I'm going to do is take this corner pocket and cut that out, and that dimension, if I look at it, is a 60 minus 20. That dimension is a 40, and this dimension was my 100 minus 20, which is an 80. No, sorry, 40 by what height? B was 40 minus this height of 10. So that would be, no, through this thickness of 10, that would be a 30 by 40. 40 this way by 30 tall notch. So I'm going to rotate the part around, and I'm going to create a sketch. I need a plane to sketch on. Well, now that I have a solid, I could go back and sketch on the front plane or the right plane or the top plane or any of those. But now that I have a solid, I'm going to go ahead and sketch on a plane of the solid. And so I'm going to click on sketch, and it says select a planar face or edge or something to sketch on. I'm going to go over here and select the plane on the end of this part and click on it. Right now my sketch plane is the edge of that object, but I really want to square this thing up, so I will go over to view orientation and perpendicular, and so now it also scaled it up fairly nicely, and I'm going to do a 40 by 30 cut on this thing, and I'm going to do that by drawing a rectangle. It's probably the easiest thing to do. Rectangle. I'm going to anchor the rectangle to this top corner of the existing geometry, and I'm just going to bring it on down. Okay, that rectangle is created. I will accept it, but it's blue because it's not dimensioned. Now let's talk just a moment about how I want this part to behave. if I look at the drawing, it didn't give me this 40 wide dimension. It gave me the 20. Okay, it could have given me the 40 if it wanted to, but it should not have given me both. With the 20 there, I believe it's the intention of whoever created this part that they wanted this 20 to be independent of the 60, that if the 60 got bigger or smaller, they still wanted the 20 to survive. So rather than dimensioning the rectangle to size 40, instead what I'd rather do is dimension the gap between this edge and that edge and make it a 20. Let's go to the Smart Dimension. I'm going to click on this edge, and I will click on that edge and make it turn orange, and then I will pull up here, and right now that's 11.95, and I'm going to make that a 20, and there we are. And notice this edge is now turned black, and so is that one, and so is this one, but this one has not. Why? Because I can still move it up and down. I haven't located it. Looking at the picture again, okay, I could dimension this inside dimension, but the dimension that was given to me that controls that height was that 10. So let me dimension that 10, which will be dimension between this line and the bottom line. Coming over here, I will click right there, and I'll type in a 10. And it expanded. My entire drawing is black. I will accept the change. And then I will go over with that sketch selected. I'll go over to Feature, and I'm going to do an extruded cut. We're going to remove material with this tool. I click on Extruded Cut. It knows I'm going to cut using this sketch that I had highlighted. I'm going to rotate around and see what the story is. And I see that it's going to take my sketch here and extrude into the part. And right now it says I'm going to extrude a blind distance of 100. And the 100 is there because that's the last thing I typed into that box. If I type a 20 into there, it says I will only extrude to that distance, to a blind distance. Now let's look at what else would make sense here. Okay, through all says whatever is in this geometry, I'm just going to cut through it all in that direction. Up to next would go all the way to the next face that it would hit. Up to vertex, a vertex is a point. Up to a surface, okay, mid-plane, okay, through all and blind are probably the two most common, and we do not want through all in this case because I don't want the cut to go out to here and beyond, okay. I want it to stop early, so I'm going to leave this as blind. And now we need to get the right dimension. Let's bring the picture back into play. And the dimension given is that this distance is a 20 and that A is a 100. So the easiest thing to do would be to do the math in our head and say 100 minus 20 is an 80. And so we could do an extrude blind to 80 and hit enter, and it would cut away the material shown. I want to take a look at something. I'm going to try, I didn't really plan this, but I'm going to try and see if offset from surface gives me the better idea. Okay, because what I'd like to do is cut, let's see, dimension, direction of extrude. This should be a face or plane, that one. And I want to offset from that surface 20 millimeters. This is mildly advanced. Okay, and I actually have never done it before, but that's okay, but it makes sense in this case. It says here's my plane. I want to go until I am offset from this surface over here a certain amount. and that actually lets me type in the 20, which in looking at the part is more like what I believe the designer of the part intended. They would much prefer I type in the 20 and not the 100 minus 20. So we've achieved that with the offset from surface. And so let's preview this before we leave it. And that has given me a significant piece of the geometry that I'm after. If I bring this back in, we can see the part here. I've got a pretty good chunk of it. And so I will accept that new addition to the part. Now let's look at what we have so far. We have our original Boss Extrude, and when I click on it, it highlights the faces that were created by that operation or feature. And then I have a cut. When I click on it, it highlights the new faces that were created there. These both have plus signs next to them, okay, which means they have sketches underneath them. And as we talked about documenting a part, I would want you to open these and edit each of the sketches. And we could re-edit the sketches by a click. I'm clicking on Edit Sketch, and it shows that very first sketch that I created. Let's view normal to it. And there's the first sketch that I created. I'm going to X out of it. Okay, and I have my part now. Okay, and to finish it up, I need to create a couple of notches. I need to create a notch back here, and the drawing says that's a 20 by 20 notch. Then on this other edge is a 30 by 10 notch. And so very simple sketches will let me create that. And so I'm going to create the feature different this time. I'm going to not create the sketch first. Instead, I'm going to click on extruded cut. And by clicking on this, it brings me straight into selecting a plane, because it knows that I need to do a sketch anyway. So it's really brought me into the start of a sketcher with only one click. And so I could click on this plane, sketch on that plane. I could rotate around and sketch on this back plane. Probably the easiest thing to do is to sketch on this plane right here. I can see with these two icons, I'm in the sketcher. I will view perpendicular, and then I will create another rectangle. That rectangle I will anchor at the corner. When I get to the corner, I see the dot highlight. I'll drag it downward. There's the rectangle that I want. I will smart dimension to a 20. Let's see, I'm going to take it outside where it's a little easier to see. So that is a 20. And I will dimension this one a 20 as well. Okay. And everything about my sketch has turned black. And so I will accept the sketch and exit. And now let's look at what I can do with this cut. I could do a blind cut of, say, 5 millimeters, and I would create, and I'll preview it, I'll create that geometry. That is another little pocket right there. That's not what I want, so I'll go back in and let's see, actually let me keep it and say that's a mistake. Oops, I accidentally created the wrong geometry. To fix it, I'm going to go to this cut that created the faces that are wrong. I'm going to edit the feature. Let me go back and do that again. I'm going to click on the cut. It brings up a set of things to do. I could edit the sketch with this icon, or I can edit the feature with this one. Edit feature we'll use quite a lot to make changes to parts. Edit feature. Okay, I don't want to do a blind cut of 5 millimeters. I could remember my math and remember that this is 20 millimeters. Let's take a look at that. Okay, that would go all the way to the edge. But should I ever change the length of this part, I don't know what would happen. What I want to do in this case is either an up to a surface, we'll look at them, instead of blind, I could do up to next and nothing changed. I'd have to tell it then, let's see. Yeah, up to next doesn't need anything else. I could do up to surface as I did, or an offset from surface and type in a 0. But in this case, I don't want to worry what's there. I'm going to say through all. Now, what through all means is whatever's there. Let's see, it's not letting me drag it right now. I'm going to drag it a little bit bigger just to get a different blind indication. Now let me go to through all. Through all says I'm going to cut through everything that's there to be cut through right now. Now in a moment I'm going to change the size of this part and we'll see what effect we get out of it. We'll go play with it. And there's that notch. And then I'm going to do another extruded cut and sketch on this surface and view perpendicular to it and draw a rectangle. We haven't done very much fancy drawing today, but that's okay. And I'm going to draw that rectangle and I'm going to smart dimension it to 30 in this direction and 10 in this direction. I'm going to pull the dimension down to outside. That works. 10. That's the size of the notch that I want to create for that one. I will accept my sketch. And I'm going to do not a blind extrude because I don't want to stop early. I'm going to do a through all extrude. And I will accept that. And I have created my geometry. And it should look an awful lot like this part. And I believe that it does. Now, let's play around a little bit and look at some things we could do. I'm going to double click on this face and I'm going to see some numbers, the 40 by 60 that I originally created. What if I change this 40 by I just double clicked on it and I'm going to change it to an 80. How will this part change? Well, let's think about it for a minute. Certainly it's going to get taller, but what about these two pockets? Will the pockets become really tall or will the pockets move? The way I created them, I know that they're going to move. It is thinking. Let's see, and I probably have to do something called a refresh and a rebuild. Up here, this traffic light thing called a rebuild says take the changes that I did. Oh, did it? I may not have saved my changes. Okay, so we're going to change that 40 to an 80 and I will accept it. Oops, I've got a phone call, so I'm going to hit a pause. Hang on a moment, I'll be back. Okay, well, I am back from the phone call that arrived. I have asked the system to change that dimension to an 80. I think maybe I didn't save things last time. We'll get rid of, no, one more time. Okay, there's the 80. Now I move up to the traffic light and say, please change it, and it does. Now look at what it did to the geometry. The notches didn't change shape. They remained the same size as the part got taller. Now, what else stayed the same? The 10 that was down here, and that was the dimension I actually typed in, stayed the same. If I had dimensioned the height of this notch, then the notch would have moved and this bottom thickness would have changed. So we're really getting what the behavior that I wanted out of this part. I'm going to do an undo, which is right up here, and part should go back to its original size, and I like that part. I might just do one other thing that's kind of fun. There is a tool for creating, let's look at some of the other tools that are out there for creating features. We've used the extruded boss to create a solid. We've used the extruded cut to make cuts. There is something called the hole wizard. We'll see that later. We can revolve solids. We can revolve cuts. We can do something called sweeps and lofts. We can do something called fillets and ribs and drafts. I want to show you one that creates an awful lot of geometry for not a whole lot of work. I want to show you this thing called a shell. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to go to the bottom of the part, and I want you to, well, no, take a look at the geometry we have here. All of these edges, and imagine that every one of these faces all of a sudden became very thin, and that it was a molded piece of plastic. Now, if all of these things became thin, and then we slice the bottom away, we could see all these thin surfaces. Well, that's what the shell does. It says, you tell me which surfaces to use, and you tell me which surface to take away, and then I'm going to make it a very thin shelled object for you. So I'm going to click on the shell command. Let's see, where did it go? Shell. And what we have is a box right here that says, when I point to it, faces to remove. Okay, what faces do I want to remove? I'm going to click inside the box to say I'm working on this. I'm going to click on this face, and I say that's the face that I want to remove. Then it says to me, how thick do I want things to be when I leave things behind? 10 millimeters would be too thick. Let me go first of all with 1 millimeter. I don't think that's going to cause any problem. And I'm going to then, let's see, it says an option to show a preview. Let's see if it does. Well, that's not a highly informative preview. So I'm going to go ahead and accept it. And if I get in trouble and don't like it, I can always do an undo. I'm going to accept it. Now, can you see the geometry that this thing has given me? Nothing has changed on this outside, but I've cut away an awful lot of material inside, and I've made all of these faces relatively thin faces. I'm going to right click and edit the feature, and let's change the 1 millimeter to a 3 millimeters and accept it. Okay, you can see things have gotten thicker all the way around. What you can't tell is that this sort of step right here has a total thickness of 3 millimeters. You can maybe guess that if you looked inside. Now, okay, just for fun, last thing I'll do, I'm going to go to this display style and go not solid, I'm going to go to hidden lines removed. This draws the object, and I can look around, I see the object. That actually doesn't show as much information as I had earlier, but if I go to hidden lines visible and I view this thing, actually let me select this plane and view perpendicular to it. Okay, I can see dotted lines, and these dotted lines indicate where there are planes that are hidden by something else that I can't see, and I can see from these dotted lines the thickness of that shelf. I can see the thickness of that wall because of these dotted lines. And if I go change my shell thickness by doing an edit feature, and I change it to, I could probably get away with a 4 millimeter, maybe even 5. Okay, little hard to tell, but things got thicker. Let me go edit it again and make it a lot thinner. Let's go back to a 1 millimeter and accept it. Okay, and of course everything got thinner. Rotating the part around, I can see these wall thicknesses are much thinner. Notice the shell command doesn't have a plus sign. Okay, it is not a command that has a sketch hiding inside of it, so there's nothing there. The shell command just does its own thing. All right, well, we can look at more circular thing. We'll look at circles next times and revolves and some other things, get more in depth into the sketcher, but I think that's probably enough for today. And so that would end this video.